Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. Today's guest is Christina Ketchen. She is a certified life and relationship coach and the host of the Self Love Shift podcast. But as she says, our deepest wisdom comes from her own lived experience. She is a nervous system nerd who has navigated her own journey of profound loss, unexpected trauma, and even a 50-foot fall down a cliff. She's here to talk about how those cracking open moments taught her lessons that formal training never could, and how real practical self-love is the key to breaking the emotional cycle that keeps us stuck. Christina, thank you very much for being here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ezekiel. It's nice to meet you and be here with you today.
All right, it's nice to meet you too. So let's dive in. Your bio is incredibly open about navigating profound loss and unexpected trauma, including a 50-foot fall down a cliff. So, can you take us back to one of those moments that cracked you open and tell us what did that setback teach you about self-love that your formal training couldn't?
I think one of the biggest takeaways from, my 50-foot fall down a cliff happened just over a year ago. So I'm still in processing and learning from that. But one of the biggest things I think that we don't necessarily learn, and that is the hardest thing to learn, is about acceptance. Acceptance of what we've been handed, acceptance of where we're at, and not judging. It's much different. Acceptance is much different than resisting something, which keeps us stuck. And acceptance allows flow. And acceptance is just, it doesn't mean that you don't want to grow and evolve and change. However, there's this piece around acceptance which takes us out of resistance and stuckness. Acceptance is a piece that's been a really big gift and a continual piece to learn about.
All right, fantastic. So you talk about emotional patterns. So I'd like to know, how did your moments of setbacks reveal your own, patterns that were trying to protect you, but we are no longer serving you?
There's so many patterns. I don't know how much awareness you have around patterns or familiarity you have around patterns. But our patterns get us the very opposite of what we want. And they're so fascinating. And we adopt our patterns from our primary caregivers. So we either mirror our primary caregivers' patterns exactly, or we create a pattern in rebellion or resistance to our primary caregivers' patterns. So our patterns come from early childhood. They're super fascinating. And, there's so many different ones, but we can talk about a pattern called rose-colored lenses. We can talk a pattern about not good enough. We can talk about a pattern, fear of conflict. These are all patterns. And one of the patterns the first pattern I learned about myself, for myself, was not good enough. And it blew my mind because I believed I was good enough. Like I had real good clarity on who I was and how I showed up in the world, or so I thought. So when that pattern was exposed to me, it was very life-changing. And, our patterns are attached to these stories that we don't even know are playing in our subconscious mind. They're running the show. They're automatic and habitual, and they're very often not true. So it's quite interesting when we take note of what some of our patterns are and start to shift them, because it really does break down the walls and can take us out of this stuckness or things that, how we don't want to show up in life, or actually really important repeated relationship struggles, right? Keep dating the same person, keep having the same argument, all along those lines, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it sure does, sure does. So, Christina, your work focuses on self-love that isn't fluffy. What's the difference? And what did real practical self-love look like for you when you were healing from that fall?
For me, and my foundational belief around self-love is, you're right, it's not fluffy. However, relaxing in a bubble bath is a good self-care practice if that fills your cup. But the essence of self-love for me is, like I'd mentioned, really having a handle on what how I'm talking to myself throughout the day, in moments of frustration, in moments of fear. And that voice inside our head is the foundation of where we sit on the self-love spectrum. So is that voice encouraging? Is that voice compassionate? Does that voice sound like the way you would talk to your best friend, someone you care about, or even a perfect stranger? So it's self-love to me, like I said, fundamentally is all about how we are talking to ourselves, because we are listening to a tape 24 hours a day, all day long. Well, I mean, maybe we sleep, but hey.
All right. So you are a nervous system nerd. So I'd
Mm,
like to know what exactly does that mean, and
mm.
how did that experience or your other traumas lead you to focus so much on nervous system regulation?
Yeah, the nervous system is fascinating because the nervous system is sensing danger and safety, or familiarity and the unknown at all times. And this was really heightened for me after my fall, because I realized, I was 3, 4 months after my fall, and my body was still exhibiting symptoms that I was in danger, right? Digestion shutdowns, sleep issues, jumpiness. And yet at the same time, I knew that I was safe and that I was okay. So that experience really heightened my curiosity, and my curiosity essentially about the nervous system and what a big part it has to do in our everyday life. When we talk about the nervous system, there's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And
Mm,
the sympathetic nervous system is when it's that fight, flight, freeze, when we're functioning reaction, and when we're functioning from the amygdala, that part of the brain that is fight, flight, freeze. And
yeah.
when we're in that state, we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex, which is where we can reason, calm down, think through something logically. And when we're in the parasympathetic nervous system, we are in that state of calm, rational, logical thinking, big picture thinking. And I'm my learning about this has made me realize that we hover in this state. A lot of us, I think, our baseline is higher than it could be, where we are easily reactive and easily triggered and on edge and agitated, not at peace, not at calm. And it's not just about meditation or grounding, even though those are great tools, but this is about just doing this simple thing called breathing and calming the mind down a little bit to have access to this ability to think through something rationally, which is so powerful. Because if we could have a self loving moment when somebody says, "Hey, you didn't do this thing," or "Hey, you always show up like this," if we could take a breath and respond from that place of that parasympathetic, calm access to the prefrontal cortex, it helps us realize that what is happening is not necessarily an attack on us, nor is it who we are in the world, how we show up, or representative of, like I said, who we are. So when we have that moment to calm down and say, wait a second here, I'm going to get curious and ask a question about this, right? As opposed to
Mm,
reacting. So that nervous system differential is, we can put it so many different ways, but we can put it in, it gives us access to a calm, wholehearted response versus an emotional, irrational reaction. Does that answer your question?
yeah. So you have a you have a great philosophy that we don't need fixing. So I'd like to know, how hard was it to believe that about yourself when you were in that messy, hurting phase?
Well, I believe that we are all good enough right here, right now. And then again,
Mm,
this goes back to that thing we touched on, is that yes, we can strive and want to grow and change and evolve and accomplish things, but that doesn't equate that we aren't good enough right now. So I really am a firm believer in this is actually goes back to that very first thing we talked about, which is acceptance. I don't need to be fixed. I accept where I'm at and can still strive and can still grow. But to do that from a place of thinking we're less than, I think that's that perpetual cycle of not enoughness. And I actually call it a current epidemic. And realistically, I think that if we look back on all the self help and self care books and gurus that have left this world already, this not enoughness piece has been around for a long time. So I think that, in the world of social media and all the access we have to messaging and to lives that look so amazing through the screen, it has heightened that even more, that comparison model. So I'm a real firm believer in we are enough right here, right now, and I am doing my very best. And if we can hold that place, I think that's a stronger foundation to build and grow and evolve from than one of inferiority or what we consider inferiority. Does that resonate with you?
yeah, yeah, sure. So I'd like to know, how did your cracking open moment, or let me put it this way, rock bottom moment, teach you to confront that feeling of quote unquote not enoughness that you talked about?
Well, I think fundamentally, Ezekiel, it's not true. That not enough,
Mm,
I'm not enough, I'm not good enough is a lie. And if we
mm,
can hear that story that's going on, which we talked about earlier, right? That story that's playing automatically, if we can actually tune in and hear it, which means maybe we need to say it out loud. Maybe we need to actually talk to ourselves to hear what's going on in there and then ask the very powerful question, hey, is this even true? Like, is this what I just said? Is it absolutely true? Because I've learned that the answer to that question almost all the time is no, I don't know this to be true. And that can open up space to look at it differently. So it's all perspective, right? The only thing we have control over in life is how we feel, how we think, how we show up in this world. That is the only thing we have control over. And why not
mm.
walk through it believing that we are doing the best that we can? Doesn't mean we don't want to grow and change and evolve, but I'm doing the best that I can.
Wow, wow, that was a really deep response there. Really, really deep one to reflect on. So, for a person listening who feels cracked open by perhaps maybe a loss or trauma right now, or maybe does feel broken, you understand? What is the first practical step you'd recommend for such a person to find a kinder way forward?
Well, I just want to touch on something. You used the word trauma, and I just want to touch on the fact that there's something called big trauma, and like they call it big t, big trauma, little
Mm,
trauma. And we can paint a picture of what big trauma looks like. And little trauma can be growing up with a parent who doesn't show up at your sporting events, doesn't encourage you, criticizes you, or
mm,
expects you to have, where's the missing 5% on the test? That those leave imprints, and as I'm sure you can hear, feed into this not enough story. So for anybody who's experiencing any level of not enoughness or any level of trauma, talking to somebody is helpful. I look at basic things and I'm like, okay, there are some fantastic books out there that can help around this. There are some amazing tools that can help us navigate trauma and loss. And one of them is to journal, to get it out of our bodies.
mm,
Because when we leave it in and we don't talk about it, we make it bigger than it is. because that's feeding into this story, right? So I think there's so many things that we can do to help ourselves. The first one is to recognize that whatever that traumatic event was, however big or little, it is not about you and does not define you. It is something that has happened to you, and you can get support to help you transition through it and essentially grow from it.
Wonderful, wonderful response. All right. So I'd like to know, Christina, after all this work, both on yourself and for others, so what does being successful truly mean to you right now?
Giving one person a glimmer of hope.
Wow, fantastic. This is a new one. I get to talk to different people on this podcast, and there is always a common question I ask everyone: what does being successful mean to them? I get to hear different meaning of success from different people, and I can tell that this is a unique one. Fantastic. So, Christina, this has been a really deep and healing conversation. So, for listeners who wants to connect with you or get to learn more from you, say masterclass on emotional patterns, where is the best place for them to go?
The best place to go is my website, which is ChristinaKetchen.com. There are links to everything there. I have, as you mentioned in the beginning, I have a podcast on all the platforms that are out there. It is called The Self-Love Shift. And I just put up 20-minute episodes that speak to all of these things in more depth that I talk about. And I post on Substack every week. And I have loads of free tools there for people who are navigating, love, relationships, self-love, communication, all that good stuff. And if your listeners are interested, if they go to ChristinaKetchen.com/masterclass, there's a free masterclass there that can help people walk through how to shape up some of the things they think they want in life. How do I get them? How do I hear what's going on in there? So it's a good it's I call it a little masterclass, but it's a beefy project if you want to take a look at it.
All right, fantastic. I'll be sure to add the necessary links to the show notes so that listeners can easily get to, find you and your resources. So yeah, it's been a really great time chatting with you today, Christina, and I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks so much for the conversation, Ezekiel. It was really, really enjoyable. Thank you.
I appreciate your time.